Good evening, it's Friday the 31st of January and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Air tragedy. Military helicopter and passenger plane collided in DC, killing 67 in the deadliest US crash since 2001. Hostage deal. Hamas releases 8 captives as Israel frees 110 Palestinian prisoners following delay over security concerns. Gaming innovation. University of Warwick develops scent-enhanced headset to boost immersion with smells like burning rubber and machine oil.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Mehin De Silva.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us on World News Tonight. The collision that happened between a military helicopter and a passenger plane carrying 64 people in Washington, D.C. has killed all 67 people on both aircrafts. It was the deadliest aviation accident in the United States since 2001.
Rescue efforts went on through the night, but no survivors were found from the deadly collision of an American Airlines aircraft and the Army helicopter. U.S. authorities announced that 28 bodies had been recovered and believe all 67 people on board died. A U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter on a training flight collided with American Airlines Flight 5342 on Wednesday night local time while approaching Ronald Reagan National Airport near Washington, D.C., sending the 2 aircraft plummeting into the Potomac River, the deadliest U.S. air crash since 2001. The jet had departed from Wichita, Kansas with 60 passengers and 4 crew members, while the helicopter had 3 military personnel on board. According to AP, less than 30 seconds before the crash, an air traffic controller asked the helicopter if it had the arriving plane in sight. According to CBS News, figure skating athletes and their coaches were on board the plane, including teenagers Gina Han and Spencer Lane, who are believed to be of Korean descent. They were returning home from the National Development Camp, which was held in connection with the recent U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters there appeared to have been an elevation issue with the helicopter and said Army investigators were on the ground looking into the matter. Meanwhile, South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol expressed his deep sorrow over the plane crash. The Seoul government is working to obtain a passenger list, though it is still unclear if any Korean nationals were on board.
As students return to school in Sydney, concerns remain high within the Jewish community following a wave of anti-Semitic attacks and vandalism. While authorities say there is no ongoing threat after finding a caravan filled with explosives in rural New South Wales, police are ramping up patrols at places of worship and schools to ensure the safety.
Australian authorities say they have prevented what could have been a devastating attack after discovering a trailer loaded with explosives on a rural property in rural northwest Sydney. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns described the discovery as a potential mass casualty event, revealing concerns that it may have been intended to target the Jewish community. The explosives, believed to have been stolen from a mining site, had the capacity to cause significant destructions, with a potential blast zone of 40 meters in diameter. Officials confirmed that a list of Jewish targets was found near the trailer, but investigations into the exact motive and planned use are ongoing. A joint counter-terrorism task force, including the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, has been launched, with over 100 officers working on the case. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese strongly condemned the act, stating that hate and extremism have no place in Australian society. Investigators are now working to determine whether the individual behind the explosives have broader extremist ties and if further threats remain.
Healthcare workers in Rio de Janeiro are trying to protect the city's most vulnerable residents from the potentially deadly effects of an intense heat wave. The situation is particularly dire in the favelas, where many residents lack access to utilities like water and electricity.
Amid an intense heat wave in Rio de Janeiro, nurses are visiting some of the city's impoverished neighborhoods to provide primary care to at-risk populations. That includes the elderly, children, and pregnant women like Letitia. She says the heat has her worried about how her labor will go. Temperatures this week climbed towards 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The situation is particularly dire in the favelas, where many residents lack access to essential utilities like water and electricity. Healthcare teams navigate narrow alleys and even walk along train tracks to reach their patients. Maria is a nurse who does home visits in the community. She says houses are narrow and closer together in the area, and not everyone has access to air conditioning. Despite that, some residents are getting creative, with water hoses and makeshift pools to cool off in the extreme heat. It's very hot. There's often a water shortage. We have fun like this on our doorstep because we're poor. We don't have the money to go to the beach, says local resident Thaisa.
Tensions are rising in eastern Congo as Rwandan-backed M23 rebels continue their advance after seizing the key city of Goma. Despite growing international condemnation, including aid cuts from Germany and Britain, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame remains defiant, saying his country is ready for confrontation.
President Paul Kagame said that Rwanda was ready to, quote, deal with any possible confrontation with South Africa, should it arise over the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The long-simmering conflict in Congo has intensified over the last week, with M23 rebels capturing the strategic city of Goma. Congo, South Africa and others accuse Rwanda of backing M23. Kagame has rejected criticism over his country's role in the conflict. During a virtual summit of East African leaders, Kagame accused South African President Cyril Ramaphosa of distorting recent conversations about the conflict. Congo President Felix Tshisekedi did not attend the virtual summit. Instead, he gave a speech to the nation in which he promised a military campaign to recover lost territory. Rwanda is facing an international backlash over its actions in eastern Congo. It has repeatedly intervened there, either directly or through allied militias over the past 30 years in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide. The United States has told Rwanda it is deeply troubled by Goma's fall. Germany has cancelled aid talks with Rwanda, while Britain said the $40 million of annual bilateral assistance it gives to Kigali were under threat. After seizing Goma, M23 fighters were advancing south from the town of Minova along the western side of Lake Kivu. Goma itself is a lakeside city of nearly 2 million and a major hub for displaced people and aid groups. M23 says it plans to administer the city and appears to be settling in for a lengthy period of control. Scores of Congolese asylum seekers who fled to Rwanda during recent fighting are returning home.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Kash Patel, President Donald Trump's nominee for FBI director, faced a contentious confirmation hearing, including questions over his views on the January 6 attack on the US Capitol and why he couldn't say Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
President Donald Trump's nominee for FBI Director Kash Patel faced a fiery Senate confirmation hearing on Thursday. In an exchange with Democratic Senator Peter Welch, Patel would not say that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Patel has previously claimed, without evidence, that the FBI used undercover operatives to entrap rioters during the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol. However, he appeared to break with Trump on his sweeping pardons for all of the nearly 1,600 people charged in the attack, including hundreds who were convicted of assaulting police.
And I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
When asked by Welch whether he would take legal action against Trump's opponent in the 2024 election, Kamala Harris, whom the president has called a criminal who should be prosecuted, Patel vowed to follow the Constitution.
There is no prosecution or that the FBI will ever initiate because the FBI will only do investigations, and those will only be open where there's a factual and constitutional basis to do so.
Democrats on their own will not be able to block Patel from being confirmed. Trump has so far succeeded in securing approval for one highly controversial nominee. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was confirmed last week in a 51-50 vote. after Vice President J.D. Vance broke a tie caused by 3 Republican no votes.
The United States President linked diversity efforts to air travel safety concerns following a recent crash. While acknowledging the cause remains unknown, he suggested there were strong opinions and ideas on the matter.
U.S. President Donald Trump struck a somber note on Thursday in the wake of a mid-air collision at a Washington, D.C. airport that killed 67 people. An American Airlines jet preparing to land at Reagan Washington National Airport crashed into a U.S. Army helicopter on a training flight late Wednesday night. He went on to imply, without evidence, that federal diversity efforts were at fault and read from a Federal Aviation Administration document from more than a decade ago that said some mental and physical disabilities would not on their own disqualify someone from working in air traffic control. Trump provided no proof to back up any assertions that the FAA's diversity push could have weakened its capabilities. That prompted a sharp retort from Biden's Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who wrote on social media, quote, "Despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying." Trump still hasn't named a permanent candidate to head the FAA. The former transportation administrator stepped down when Trump took office after close Trump advisor Elon Musk called for him to resign last year.
Thank you very much.
But following Thursday's crash, the deadliest U.S. air disaster in more than 20 years, Trump said he had appointed an acting head of the FAA. He named Chris Rushlow, a U.S. Air Force veteran who had worked at the FAA for more than 2 decades.
Hamas freed 3 Israeli and 5 Thai hostages in Gaza, and Israel began releasing 110 Palestinian prisoners after delaying the process in anger at the surging crowds at one of the hostage handover points.
Chaotic scenes as Hamas handed over Israeli hostage Arbel Yehud to the Red Cross on Thursday, fearful and apparently struggling to walk as crowds surged around her. Israel delayed the release of 110 Palestinian prisoners under the Gaza ceasefire deal in an angry response, but went ahead after mediators committed to ensuring the safe passage of hostages in future releases, the Prime Minister's office said. An Israeli hostage abducted by Hamas from the same kibbutz as Yehud, 80-year-old Gadi Moses, was also released, along with 5 Thai nationals who'd been working on Israeli farms when armed militants burst through the border fence on October 7, 2023. And Israeli soldier Agam Berger, who was first led between ruined buildings and over piles of rubble in Jabalia in northern Gaza. Thursday's releases saw another show of force for Hamas, a reminder that it still has a strong presence in Gaza after more than 15 months of heavy bombardment from the Middle East's most advanced military. Yehud was handed over on the site of the bombed house of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who was killed by Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened death to anyone hurting hostages and urged mediators to ensure the jostling crowd scenes wouldn't be repeated. Later on Thursday, buses arrived in the West Bank city of Ramallah carrying some of the Palestinian prisoners, expected to be freed as part of the phased agreement. Palestinian health officials said at least 14 Palestinians were hurt by Israeli fire, some with live and rubber bullets, others from gas inhalation, as they gathered at the entrance to Ramallah in the Israeli-occupied West Bank to welcome the freed detainees. There was no immediate comment from Israel. In Israel, it was a day of celebration in what has become known as Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, where people were watching on giant screens. Some cheered when US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff joined them, in apparent gratitude for his role in securing the ceasefire deal. More than 250 hostages were abducted in the Hamas attack in Israel, and more than 1,200 people were killed, according to Israeli tallies. Israel's assault has killed more than 47,000 Palestinians in Gaza and laid waste to the enclave, where people face severe shortages of medicine, fuel and food.
NASA's analysis of asteroid Bennu has revealed the chemical building blocks of life. Scientists have found amino acids and nucleobases in the asteroid's dust, supporting the theory that space rocks may have delivered the ingredients for life to Earth billions of years ago.
Rock and dust samples collected from a deep space asteroid have been found to contain the building blocks of life. That's according to research that provides some of the best evidence yet that such space rocks may have seeded Earth with the raw ingredients for the emergence of living organisms. In 2020, NASA's OSIRIS-REx robotic spacecraft collected samples from asteroid Bennu, a rocky remnant of a larger celestial body that formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago. 3 years later, they were parachuted back to Earth. From these samples, two important findings emerged. One analysis, published in the journal Nature Astronomy, found that the samples contained a diverse mixture of organic compounds, and the other, published in the journal Nature, found that the samples contained minerals. Present in the samples were 14 of the 20 known amino acids, along with all 5 nucleobases, the genetic components of DNA and RNA. These organic compounds have all been previously identified in meteorites that landed on Earth, but scientists questioned whether they could have been contaminated by terrestrial sources. In contrast, the Bennu samples were collected directly from an asteroid and were kept pristine, ensuring their authenticity. In the early solar system, planets, including Earth, were pelted by asteroids. So while scientists did not find actual DNA or RNA in the samples, these findings shed a little more light on the role asteroids might have played to make life on Earth possible.
Let's take a short commercial break now. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. A new gaming innovation is taking immersion to the next level by adding scent. Researchers at the University of Warwick are developing a gaming headset that releases smells like burning rubber and machine oil to enhance virtual experiences.
PhD student Danelle Zhozhanova isn't in a vehicle. She's playing a video game. The smell she's describing is coming from a scent tube on the gaming headset she's wearing. It's a prototype for a novel experiment at the intersection of gaming and sensory science, looking at the use of olfactory stimuli in a virtual racing scenario, and whether it could give users a boost. Professor Alan Chalmers at the University of Warwick, which is celebrating its 60th anniversary, is leading the research. The headset was designed to release specific odors such as machine oil and burning rubber at critical moments in the game. But Chalmers acknowledges those aren't exactly winning smells inside your home. The project is a collaboration with video game developers Hollywood Gaming. They're aiming to create the next big thing in gaming, though the research has applications beyond the game console.
And just try one.
Chalmers and his team have also developed a prototype device that tests people's sense of taste. He says it could be used as an early screening tool for Alzheimer's disease by measuring how someone's sense of smell and taste changes over time in, say, a cooking game.
And finally tonight, with inflation gripping Japan after decades of stable prices, consumers are feeling the strain, especially when it comes to rising food costs. Many are now turning to creative solutions to stretch their budgets and adapt to soaring prices.
37-year-old Kazuki Nakata carefully tends to his plants in the small yard outside his home in Kawasaki, Japan. What started as a hobby during the COVID-19 pandemic has become a valuable source of fresh produce for his family as he grows his own vegetables. Cabbage prices in Japan made headlines this month in Tokyo, soaring to 1,000 yen, or nearly $6.50, around the average minimum hourly wage. The staple crop is one of many items driving up the cost of living in a country with stagnant wages. As the cost of living rises, Nakata's family feels the financial benefits of homegrown food more than ever. In 2023, Nakata left his job at an electronics store to focus on growing vegetables. He grows 47 types of vegetables, including lettuce, onions, and daikon radishes, in empty plastic bottles, drink cans, and even his bicycle basket. Nakata also created a YouTube channel where he posts videos about it. It gained around 4,500 new subscribers in the second half of January alone. With vegetable prices where they are, Nakata says the interest is understandable. Recent government data show that while agriculture prices have risen, the average vegetable intake among Japanese adults reached an all-time low in November. The Nakata family, however, is going against the trend. They say they're eating more fresh vegetables than ever before.
I feel like the taste of vegetables you've grown from seeds is so many times better than normal. These vegetables are grown with love, so they're different.
That's all we have for you on our rundown here at World News Tonight. We will meet you again Monday with more updates across the globe. Stay tuned as we've got Anuradhi Vikramasinghe joining you next on the Nightly Business Report. Before we end tonight, we'll leave you with the visuals of vibrant fireworks of Hong Kong's Lunar New Year festivities. I am Mihin De Silva. Thank you for watching and have a good night.